Well, in this particular volume, I want to make some recommendations against both the advanced variation, that's 3e5, we just quickly run through the moves, e4, e6, d4, d5, and now e5, and I'm also, if I retract one move, going to be making some recommendations against the Tarrasch variation. Two very important lines, I think you will agree. As important, indeed, as knight c3 on the third move. Now the first of these lines we're going to look at is the advanced variation. This is a very popular line among club players. But I must say, I'm not sure I understand that, because I think it's actually quite a difficult variation to play. It's alright for the likes of Sveshnikov and other aficionados to play this line in a nice smooth manner, but it's not easy to handle the white position. And the line I'm going to recommend for black is very straightforward. It starts with the move c5. This is one of the two pawn levers that black engineers in the French defence to attack the white centre. The other one is, of course, pawn up to f6. And when white plays c3, I'm now going to recommend the straightforward move, queen to b6. This is going to be known as the Wade variation, after the New Zealand international master who died recently, Bob Wade, and it's the start of a very logical plan. Black basically avoids too many complications in the opening and concentrates on getting rid, if he can, of his so-called bad French bishop, the light square bishop on c8. And the way he does this is to play the bishop, if he can, to b5. So for instance, I'm going to show you in this first game a situation where black's plan works to perfection. And it's from the game Celia Hachaviera versus Laura Zayez Gonzalez, and this game was played in Camagüey in February 2010. Basically in this game what white does isn't particularly threatening. She plays a3, and this move of course allows black to go bishop b5. This is the characteristic manoeuvre of this particular variation. So here we see black getting rid of the light square bishop. Well, in this particular game, white couldn't think of anything better than bishop d3, after which black happily exchanged the bishops and played queen to a6. In our next game, we won't see black exchanging queens in a similar position. But queen a6 is pretty reliable. It's a very similar situation to a line which occurs in the advanced Caro-Kann. Capablanca discovered this idea of exchanging off the light square bishops and then playing queen a6. Essentially, it solves all of black's opening problems. And in fact, after the queen exchange, because of this move a3, you know, white has a pretty serious weakness on b3. In fact, I think white would much rather take the move a3 back in this position. But of course, this position is equal, which is rather a victory for black in the opening, I would say. And, well, black has equalised for sure. Now the question is, where does black take it from here? Well, the first thing, of course, you've got to do is to develop your pieces. So white castles and black plays knight e7. Perhaps the black knight is en route either to f5 or perhaps over to c6 and then out to a5, where the weaknesses of b3 and c4 might then be highlighted. So white plays b4, forcing a decision, forcing a reservation, I think that's the right word, of the tension on c5. Black takes on d4 and then plays her rook to c8. So you can see black's first to the c file. It's still equal, but I think I slightly prefer black in this position. The white bishop is worse than black's bishop, and black already has the c file. Of course, white will argue that by pushing her pawns forward in this manner, she's trying to cramp black on the queen side, but it doesn't seem to work out that way. Well, white pushes forward, and black plays h5. I think the main point of that move is to secure the square f5 for a knight, and that's exactly what Zayas Gonzalez does, as white plays bishop d2, just to prepare to bring the knight out on b1, knight f5, and now knight c3 was played. Bishop comes out to e7, rook fc1, and black castles, so maintaining comfortable equality and perhaps a little bit more. As the game progresses, the difference between the two bishops might become more apparent, and the c4 square, well, that's a very nice outpost for black's pieces. So white plays knight a4. I think clearly with the intention here of more or less settling for a draw. And now black plays a clever move, g5. And the point of this move is that if white takes the pawn on g5, black's going to destroy white's centre. So, for instance, if bishop takes g5, we go bishop takes g5, knight takes g5, and now knight takes d4. And this is pretty good for black, who threatens both knight e2 check and knight b3, as well as knight takes b5. So white has a whole host of weaknesses to look after in this particular position, and I haven't even mentioned the e5 pawn yet. So g5, I think that's probably a move white wasn't expecting, but clearly it's something that she's got to deal with, and she does so by playing bishop e3. But of course that allows black to continue to press on with the initiative by taking the bishop off, by playing g4, and out comes the bishop to g5. So pretty good play by black. Alright, king f2, and pawn on to h4. Knight comes to b3, and now the second characteristic French pawn lever, f6. An excellent move, and of course this move, opening up the f-file, will definitely put pressure on white's king. So I think you can safely say this is a very thematic game. Well, white is unwilling to cede the c-file just yet, so she takes on f6, rook takes f6 check, king e2, but now black switches fronts and goes for a quick attack against white's king. And you see, white can't challenge the c-file, f-file in this position because his pawn on e3 would drop. So king d3 was played, and now black again hits hard with e5. This is definitely a pawn white must take. Up comes the knight into c4, and now all of black's pieces are participating in the attack. This is the most uncomfortable situation for white. Rook e1, rook f2, penetration to the 7th rank. King takes d5, not sure what else white had, and now black goes knight takes e3 check, whereupon white plays king c5. Rook to f5 check. The king journeys into the heart of black's position. Obviously if king d4, knight c2 check would be a total disaster, and king b4 likewise, so the king must continue his odyssey, but of course it's going to be unlikely that white is going to be able to survive this onslaught. Nevertheless, the king continues its merry way to a7, but unfortunately the upshot is that white has lost a piece. So there's no way back from this one. A piece down, vulnerable king, black's pieces are rampant, so the rest of the game really is a bit of an anticlimax. White's somehow going to push this pawn, relying on the a pawn for salvation, but it never quite works out that way. Black just has too many threats. White interposes, black's happy to exchange, the knight comes back. It's funny, white's got this a pawn, but it never seems to go very far. Rook a4 was played, rook g7, pawn up to a6, knight b6 check, off comes yet another piece, king b8, king h7. Of course, black can proceed in the full knowledge that the pawn ending after a7 with all the pieces coming off is completely winning for him. So white can't even play a7. Bishop f2, rook, and the king comes up. Up comes the king. Rook a7 check. King b8, rook takes a6. Okay, white didn't want to prolong the agony. Black's plan, very simple. Rook f6 to f3, whereupon the pawn on g3 will drop. So that's a pretty good game to start off with. It's a game from a lower ranking tournament, but it does give you an indication of how black's plan works in real life. This is the type of opposition we're going to be used to at club level. The white player's only graded 1800. But there's no disgrace in showing these games. In fact, this is quite an instructive demonstration of black's chances in this line. Well, in the last game we saw how easy the black position could become if the plan of exchanging the light square bishop is put into effect at an early stage. And our second game will reinforce that impression. It comes from the Budapest First Saturday tournament, which was played in February 2010, and it's between Attila Lantos playing white and Balázs Zonka playing with black. And again, white fails to get anything at all from the opening as he plays this toothless move, bishop d3. And now we saw the consequences of bishop b5 last time. This time black plays an alternative plan, c takes d4, and then only then does he play bishop b5. Again, very easy and effective. It looks as though white has built up some sort of an advantage in development after bishop takes d3, queen takes d3. But the problem is white can't make anything of this advantage in development. In order to open up the position, and this is what you must do when you've got the advantage in development, white needs a pawn lever. So in order for that to happen, you know, white's got to move that knight on f3, marked in green, and then play f4, f5. Well, this is a long way off. Meanwhile, black is mobilising his pieces, and I think the likelihood of white playing f5 in the near future is minimal, or almost non-existent. Now, black could play queen a6 in this position, but I think I prefer that plan slightly more when there's a black pawn on c5. Black's changed the goalposts a little bit in this game, and Zonka is going to just show us an alternative way to play the black position, keeping the queens on and playing an altogether more, I don't know, rich type of game, really, if you like. Well, okay, knight ec6. Clearly black is aiming to transfer his pieces to the queen side here. He thinks that's going to be the natural theatre of action. And black's plan in this position is knight b4 and queen a6, after which black starts to take control of the light squares d3 and c2. So this is another very thematic idea in this line, you know, black getting rid of the light square bishops and then trying to take charge of those squares. Well, white plays a3. I'm not at all sure I like this move because once again weaknesses start to appear on the white queen side. There seems to be now a lovely juicy hole on b3 for a black piece to occupy, and also c4 is rather weakened. However, if we just drop back one move, this plan of knight b4 is pretty strong. So a3, black try to take advantage of that straight away with knight a5, and white now play rook b1. Again, you can argue about the pros and cons of such a move, but white doesn't really like b4. That allows the black knight to settle on c4 and gives black the c4 square eternally. And he wants to move that bishop on c1, which is very tied down. So rook b1, whilst passive, you know, might be necessary. Black meanwhile continues to develop, bishop e7, and white now makes a gesture on the king side with h4. It's actually a gesture which costs him the game very shortly. However, I think white lacks an effective plan here. I really do. I think black is for choice. It's probably equal, this position, but just far more pleasant to play with black. h6, good move. Halting the advance of white's h-pawn and taking away the square g5 from a white knight and bishop. Knight e2, and black plunges in with queen b3. Then comes knight c3, and black plays knight c4. So excellent play by Sonka, just taking over the light squares. And now black's further plan might involve moves such as rook c8. I think certainly a black rook will appear on c8 sooner rather than later, and possibly even king d7. Black quite commonly plays the king to d7 in the French defence. You know, it can be a very safe square for the king. And as the endgame approaches, you know, the king is well placed in the centre. Black can also castle, of course. I mean, black exercises this option in the game. He does actually castle. Well, you'll see a little later on. I think black is quite cunning the way he plays this game. But for the time being, you know, white doesn't know yet where the black king will reside. And that, again, cuts down on white's options. Well, now white makes a mistake. It's the type of mistake which, you know, players might scoff at. Why is he showing me this awful game where white makes a mistake? Well, I think black is building up pressure here, and pressure forces a mistake. I mean, that's true of any game, and this is what white does. He plays knight d2, which is a mistake. He's tiring of that knight on c4, and he just wants rid of it. What he should do, white, is probably just try to maintain the balance by putting his rook on c1, and then I think black should castle, probably h5, and now rook c8. The game is still very open, and in the sense that all results are possible. But I think most masters would prefer black. However, this is a much safer way to play the position for white. It's probably about level, but you know, look at those white squares on the queen side. You have to take black in this position. But, as I say, Lantosh is tiring of this position. He doesn't like it. I mean, when you don't like your position, mistakes occur. Black snaps off that knight and plays bishop takes h4. So white has actually lost a pawn in this position, really, for no compensation whatsoever. And, well, black continues to shunt his pieces into light squares here to make life for white even more uncomfortable. Well, Lantosh puts his queen on e2, possibly with the idea of playing her out to g4. I don't think white can really see what to do here. The pressure that black is exerting on the queen side is really great. Rook c8, and now comes g4. Well, you know, I thought, well, surely white should play queen g4 in this position and try and do something. But it turns out that black can play g5. But black actually profits from having kept his king in the centre in this position. And with g5 and then h5, launches a very, very vigorous attack. You know, the black king can certainly sit on d7 in this position. And white is being pushed out of the game. So this is pretty horrible for white as well. But g4, just don't like it. Black retreats, putting pressure on d4, white protects, and now black castles, simple enough. Queen d3, knight takes e3, we saw this in the last game, and the idea of it is to bring the bishop out to g5. I mean, just retracting f takes e3, well, of course, white could take back with the queen. I guess then rook c4 starts to look very strong for black. Good bishop. Rooks are going to be doubled on the c-file, maybe f6 even is a plan. White is much worse. So, f takes e3, bishop g5, rook f1, queen b3, back again with a vengeance, and now black simply brings up the reserves. This is a very easy game to understand from a certain point onwards. White can do nothing. He's just trapped here in this rotten position, and well, black is just threatening to push the queenside pawns up and unseat that knight, followed by the rooks penetrating to the 7th or 8th rank. So white tries to do something. If he doesn't do something, he's going to be wiped out here. Of course, black is bossing the game. He trains fire on the pawn at d4. The white knight goes backwards. Queen c2, and now a6. Thematic control of the light squares to the end. Knight c3. Queen takes d3, rook takes d3. Rook d takes d4. All we can see here is a compromised white pawn structure. White's 2 pawns down, and, well, now he's 3 pawns down. So the rest of the game really is silence. White tries a few tricks, but there's no way back from here. There really isn't. There's nothing that white can possibly do. Rook e2 check. Rook c2, b3, and now the armada of black pawns on the king side starts to come forward. Once that happens, it really is game over. King f4, rook takes b3, king takes f5, rook takes a3, a clear 3 pawns down, king e4, bishop f6, and finally Lantosh resigned. So again, very thematic game, well played by black, not so well played by white, but very useful for our purposes because it shows how to play the black plan in this system.